Charles Leclerc is often called the fastest driver on the grid, but it seems that for every dazzling pole position, there's been a missed win, a strategic blunder, or a heartbreaking moment. Do we have a future world champion trapped in a team that can't deliver, or are we missing something? Let's find out. Charles Leclerc's path to Formula One began in 1997 in Monaco. His love for racing started when he was a young boy, thanks to his childhood friend and mentor, Jules Bianchi. Jules, 9 years older than Charles, was already making headlines in motorsport and became a guiding figure for Charles. Bianchi introduced Charles to karting, taking him to the Brignoles track in the south of France. Also, Charles's father, Hervé, a former Formula 3 driver, was instrumental in his early career, often working as a mechanic at karting events. By 2005, Charles was already racing competitively, and at just 11 years old, in 2009, he became the youngest ever winner of the French Cadet Karting Championship. The transition from local hero to international star wasn't easy though, as racing is quite expensive. Without sufficient backing, even the most talented drivers can find their paths blocked. This is where Nicolas Tolt, known for managing top drivers like Felipe Massa, entered the picture. In 2011, Todt saw Charles' potential and signed him to his management roster, and already that year, Leclerc won the prestigious World Cup in KF3. By 2012, Charles had already moved onto the international karting scene when he finished second in the European KF2 Championship and the U18 World Championship, narrowly missing out on the top spot. The following year, Charles stepped into the spotlight of the KZ1 World Championship, the pinnacle of karting, where he faced off against Max Verstappen. Their rivalry had been simmering since their earliest days in karting, and by 2013, they had gone head-to-head 33 times, with Verstappen triumphing in 24 of those battles. While both were hailed as prodigies, Verstappen frequently dominated. However, the balance of power was never set in stone, like during the second event of the season at Val d'Argenton. Starting side by side on the front row, Leclerc seized his chance with a bold wheel-to-wheel overtake. Verstappen, however, struck back immediately, forcing Leclerc down the order in a fierce counterattack. Despite their heated clashes, Verstappen maintained his dominance that season. By 2014, Nicolas Todt's support, combined with Leclerc's karting success, opened the door for Charles to Formula Renault 2, while Verstappen entered Euro Formula 3. And that means more battles in the future. I will show you all of them in this video, just keep watching. But the years between 2014 and 2016 were critical in defining Leclerc's career. In 2014, Leclerc made his debut in the Formula Renault 2 Alps Championship with Fortec Motorsports. Charles made wildcard appearances in the Euro Cup Formula Renault 2 as well, racing at iconic circuits like Spa-Francorchamps and the Nürburgring. His debut at Spa-Francorchamps was strong, as he secured a podium finish with third place in one of the races. His performance demonstrated his ability to adapt quickly to single-seater racing at an international level. But there was more. Nürburgring brought another striking performance, and boy do I love that track. In the first race, Leclerc climbed from 10th on the grid to a remarkable 5th place finish, but it was in the second race where he bloody made it, qualifying third and delivering a commanding drive to secure second place. Yet, 2014 was also a year of personal hardship for Leclerc, as his mentor and close friend Jules Bianchi suffered a devastating accident at the Japanese Grand Prix. Seems like Bianchi's crash and subsequent coma deeply affected Charles. Still, he finished the season with a second place, scoring 7 podiums and 2 wins at Monza, a track that would become a defining venue in his career. In 2015, Leclerc graduated to the FIA European Formula 3 Championship with Van Amersfoort Racing, a Dutch team with a reputation for grooming future stars. If you haven't noticed at this point, his entire career before Formula One is best described by the word grind. Racing wasn't the easiest thing for him. He's not crushing competitors, winning every race, flying through karting classes like Verstappen did, for example. However, driving alongside talents like George Russell, Charles faced some of the fiercest competition in junior racing. But in 2015, Charles finally won his 3rd ever race in the championship at Silverstone, and that's where things started to get interesting. Another of the standout moments came at Hockenheim, where Charles engaged in a battle with Felix Rosenqvist, the preseason favorite and an established figure in Formula 3. By mid-season, Charles was consistently finishing in the top 5, but that was not enough to lead the standings. However, the demanding nature of the series and a string of misfortunes began to take their toll. A heavy crash at Zandvoort following contact with Lance Stroll was just one of them. Despite the challenges, Charles finished the year in 4th place overall in the championship standings. Across 33 races, he secured 3 wins, 11 podium finishes. But while Leclerc had a strong rookie season, he was not the most dominant driver. Still, his performance was enough to earn him the title of Rookie of the Year. Leclerc's results didn't go unnoticed. Charles had not only caught the attention of the prestigious RT Grand Prix team, renowned for its dominance in GP3, but also secured the backing of Ferrari, who brought him into their driver academy. This set the stage for his next big move. We're also about to make our big move and smash 10,000 subscribers, so don't forget to subscribe. In 2016, with Ferrari's support and a seat at Art Grand Prix, Charles entered the GP3 series, a proving ground for little-known racers like Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas. Charles won the season opener in Barcelona. He controlled the race, overtaking Jake Dennis, who was on pole in the opening laps. From there, he only had to hold off challenges like Albon, but that seemed easy enough. Throughout the GP3 season, Albon actually won more races with 4 wins compared to Leclerc's 3. Still, Leclerc was able to pull ahead of Albon in the final standings. In my opinion, one of the most impressive aspects was how Charles balanced his racing commitments with F1 practice sessions for Haas and testing duties for Ferrari. That's what I call grind, working for 3 teams at the same time, and it paid off. His involvement with Haas came about as part of Ferrari's Driver Academy program. The first practice session was at the 2016 British Grand Prix, where he drove for Haas, and the team was very impressed. Despite the added workload, Charles clinched the GP3 title. Across 18 races, he secured 3 wins, 8 podiums, and 4 pole positions, accumulating 202 points, while Albon finished 25 points behind. By the end of 2016, Leclerc had climbed through the ranks of Formula Renault, Formula 3, and GP3. Thanks to his growing relationship with Ferrari, he was poised for the next step in his career. The only thing I don't really understand about this story is this: why they didn't pull him into Formula 1 at this point. He clearly had talent. He was about 20 years old and ready to go. Was it just Ferrari incapable of making any decisions once again? Let me know in the comments. Am I missing something here? The 2017 Formula 2 season turned out to be a defining year for Charles Leclerc. He was just one step away from F1, and it was time for him to lock in. His focus that year was absolutely next level, but just wait till he gets to F1. In the opening round at Bahrain, Charles grabbed pole position on his very first attempt. While the race didn't go entirely his way, with tire degradation costing him a win, he made headlines in the sprint race. Opting for an unconventional strategy, Charles made a non-mandatory pit stop. With that, he was able to unleash a series of blisteringly fast laps to claw his way back through the field. His incredible charge culminated in an epic win, and look at this guy, happy as ever. The Bahrain sprint victory set the tone for the rest of the season. At the Circuit de Catalunya in Spain, despite dealing with a faulty radio, which left him without any communication with the team, Charles managed to control the race. That brought him another W. However, Leclerc's performances on street circuits were equally impressive. In Baku, he delivered a masterclass in both qualifying and racing. Despite being hit with a time penalty for failing to slow sufficiently under yellow flags, he secured pole position and went on to win the race. He missed out on the sprint race victory due to another penalty, but give the guy a break. That year wasn't just about on-track glory for Leclerc. Midway through the season, his father passed away. Just days after that, Charles had to return to the track for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and dedicated his victories that weekend to his father. Later at Spa-Francorchamps, Charles initially secured a victory in the feature race, finishing with a significant margin. However, the post-race check showed excessive wear on the underside of his car, leading to a rather controversial disqualification. Although this setback was a blow to his championship campaign, Leclerc didn't give up and continued to outpace experienced drivers like Oliver Rowland and Artem Markelov. Statistically, Charles finished his F2 year with 7 feature race wins, 8 pole positions, and 10 podium finishes. Despite occasional penalties and disqualifications, his championship winning margin was an emphatic 72 points. Yet, it wasn't just that year's performance that set him apart. The promotion to F1 was the result of years of hard work and talent. And that's pretty much what defines Charles, his work ethic and his ability to perform day in and day out. That's how you get into the top team, I guess. That's what they were looking for. Thanks to Ferrari's partnership with Sauber, Charles joined the team for the next season, replacing Pascal Wehrlein. Though racing for Sauber, a team that had been struggling in the midfield, Charles quickly turned heads with his performances. I've made a video about Sauber and their downfall recently, you can check it out on the channel. In his debut race at the Australian Grand Prix, Charles qualified 18th and finished 13th, battling with a car that lacked competitive pace. Classic Sauber, honestly. But Azerbaijan Grand Prix stood out for Charles. Brace yourselves, he was still in Sauber, but look at that performance. Yet, despite the challenging conditions and countless incidents around, Charles seized the opportunity to secure an incredible 6th place. It was Sauber's best finish since 2015. Leclerc's successes continued to unfold when, after several races, he began consistently outperforming his teammate, Marcus Ericsson, both in qualifying and on race days. By mid-season, Charles had firmly established himself as Sauber's lead driver, often dragging the Sauber C37 into Q2 during qualifying sessions, even on tracks where the car's inherent weaknesses were most evident. However, one of the most impressive performances came at the Russian Grand Prix. Though many midfield drivers struggled to make an impact, Charles managed to secure a 7th place finish, effectively becoming best of the rest behind the top 3 teams. That Kevin Magnussen overtake was sweet.
Oh, look at that! And if he does that at Ferrari next year, we'll be purring even more.
Charles finished 13th in the driver's standings by the season's end, an exceptional achievement considering Sauber's position in the pecking order. Not bad for a first season. He scored points in 10 of 21 races, amassing 39 points compared to teammate Marcus Ericsson's 9 points. You might think these numbers are bad, and they are, but the car was rubbish, and so you have to take that into account. In a more competitive car, Charles would have dominated that season. That's why Ferrari announced in September 2018 that Charles would replace Kimi for the 2019 season. It was time to enter the big leagues, but would the car be as good as Ferrari promised? At the 2019 season opener in Australia, Charles finished 5th, close behind teammate Sebastian Vettel. Nice. But it was the second race in Bahrain where Charles truly announced himself. During the race, Leclerc dominated until a late race engine issue dropped him to 3rd. Despite the setback, he claimed his first ever Formula 1 pole position, becoming the youngest driver in Ferrari's history to start from the top spot. The Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps marked a significant milestone as well. Just a day before the race, Charles' close friend and fellow driver Antoine Hubert tragically lost his life in a Formula 2 crash on the same circuit. Starting from pole position, Leclerc led for most of the race, but as the laps wound down, Lewis Hamilton began closing the gap in his still insanely dominant Mercedes. With less than 5 laps to go, the margin between the two drivers had shrunk dramatically, and Leclerc faced relentless pressure from the reigning world champion. Despite this, Charles didn't go down without a fight. The final lap was a nail-biter as Hamilton pushed to overtake, but Charles crossed the finish line just 0.9 seconds ahead, securing his maiden Formula 1 victory. And he wasn't going to stop at that. Just a week later, he delivered another masterclass at Monza. In the early laps, Hamilton launched several attacks, but Charles held his ground, even skimming the track limits as he defended his position. At one point, Leclerc received a black and white flag for unsportsmanlike driving after forcing Hamilton off the track at the Roggia chicane. But come on, he was asking for it. As the race progressed, Hamilton's tyres began to degrade, shifting the focus to Bottas as the main threat. With the closing laps approaching, Bottas rapidly closed in on Leclerc. But just as the pressure mounted, a mistake from Bottas in the final laps allowed Charles to maintain his lead. Roaring across the finish line, Leclerc made history, becoming the first Ferrari driver to win at Monza since Fernando Alonso in 2010. That's a while ago. However, this win's also revealed cracks within Ferrari's team dynamics. Leclerc's pace frequently outshone that of his 4-time world champion teammate Sebastian Vettel. This led to disagreements over team orders and on-track incidents. The Brazilian Grand Prix provided a vivid example when the two collided, taking both cars out of the race. But in classic Ferrari fashion, they decided to do absolutely nothing about it. Anyways, 2019 was a standout year for Charles. He finished the season 4th in the Drivers' Championship ahead of Vettel with 2 wins, 4 fastest laps, and 10 podium finishes. But that only got him 4th place in the championship. I think at that point it became very clear that what's going to be holding Charles back in Ferrari is strategy and car dynamics, not his driving skill. And 2020 proved it right away. The 2020 SF1000, plagued by lack of straight-line speed and aerodynamic deficiencies, was one of the most uncompetitive Ferraris in recent history. That forced Leclerc and Vettel to battle in the midfield, a humbling experience for a team with such lofty expectations. Despite the car's limitations, Charles still delivered a couple standout performances. In Austria, the opening race of the season, he secured a surprise 2nd place finish, capitalizing on the chaos ahead of him. At the British Grand Prix in Silverstone, Leclerc started 8th on the grid. Despite the car's lack of competitiveness and the track's chaotic pace, with tire failures affecting several drivers, Leclerc used Ferrari's strategy to secure 3rd place. While these podiums were highlights, the Italian Grand Prix was especially painful, with both Ferraris finishing outside the points at their home race. That's a first in decades. The problems were piling up, but Ferrari didn't seem to care enough to solve them. In Bahrain, Leclerc was involved in a first-lap collision, ending his race prematurely. At other tracks, Ferrari's tire degradation issues made it impossible for Leclerc and Vettel to compete even with midfield rivals like McLaren, Racing Point, and Renault. That's how bad they were that year. Eventually, the team finished a dismal 6th in the Constructors' Championship, their worst result since 1980. Leclerc's individual performances, however, were a silver lining. He consistently outperformed Vettel, finishing 8th in the Drivers' Championship compared to Vettel's 13th. The disappointment of 2020 would only fuel his hunger for success in the seasons to come. But boy, did Charles have to stay hungry for a while. It was about to get way worse before getting any better. In 2021, with Sebastian Vettel departing for Aston Martin, Carlos Sainz joined Ferrari, forming a young and dynamic driver pairing. With Ferrari aiming to reclaim their place as a top-tier team, the new SF21 model was a step forward, but still not capable of challenging for wins regularly. Yet, Leclerc began the season strongly at Monaco, his home Grand Prix. Charles secured pole position, and let me tell you, that was exciting. Unfortunately, a crash in the final moments of qualifying caused damage that couldn't be repaired in time, forcing him to miss the race. In Baku, Leclerc once again secured pole position while the race proved challenging. Leclerc led initially, but was soon overtaken by Hamilton, who utilized the slipstream on Baku's long straights. As the race progressed, Ferrari's lack of race pace became evident, and Leclerc finished in 4th place, unable to fend off faster competitors. At Silverstone, Leclerc delivered one of his most remarkable performances of the season. Starting from 4th on the grid, he seized the lead after a first-lap collision between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Despite experiencing intermittent engine issues, Leclerc kept pushing. Meanwhile, Hamilton, despite receiving a 10-second penalty for the earlier collision, gradually closed the gap to Leclerc. With just 3 laps remaining, Hamilton executed a decisive overtake at Copse Corner, relegating Leclerc to 2nd place. This runner-up finish was one of 2 Leclerc's podiums of the 2021 season, dropping him to 8th place in the Drivers' Championship. Although Carlos Sainz finished ahead in 5th thanks to a string of consistent performances, their partnership finally provided a sense of stability in the team. However, now you have 2 young drivers, best in the world, trapped in a car that cannot compete with a team that cannot make one decision correctly. What a waste of potential that is. The 2022 Formula One season marked an opportunity to return to the top of the sport. The car issue was finally solved. That's the good news. Despite a couple of engine failures, but that's a Ferrari. By winning the season opener in Bahrain, Leclerc capitalized on the team's strong preseason work, securing pole position, fastest lap, and leading most of the race. 2 races later, Leclerc took another commanding victory in Australia, extending his early lead in the Drivers' Championship. His battles with Max Verstappen were a recurring theme at the beginning of the season. But the season was largely dominated by Verstappen, as we all know. The Austrian Grand Prix was a great example. Starting from 2nd on the grid, he overtook Max Verstappen multiple times, demonstrating Ferrari's competitive edge. However, in the closing stages, Leclerc encountered throttle issues, causing his car to maintain speed even when he lifted off the pedal. Scary stuff. Despite this challenge, he managed to control the car to secure a crucial victory, his first since the Australian Grand Prix earlier in the season. However, the promise of the early season gave way to frustration. Ferrari's strategy errors, including botched pit calls and tire mismanagement, became a recurring theme. The Monaco Grand Prix was a true heartbreaker for Leclerc. Starting from pole position at his home race, he led comfortably in the early stages. However, as the track dried, Ferrari's strategy faltered. A delayed decision to switch from wet to intermediate tires, followed by a poorly timed double-stack pit stop, resulted in Leclerc losing track position. Ultimately, Leclerc finished 4th, missing out on a podium at his home Grand Prix. I know a performance like this would break me. That's one thing for sure. Similar problems plagued the team further on. In Silverstone, a late decision to keep Leclerc out on old tires during a safety car period cost him a potential victory, relegating him to a 4th place finish. Similarly, at the Hungarian Grand Prix in Budapest, an ill-timed switch to hard tires, which struggled to generate optimal temperature, saw Leclerc drop from a commanding position to finish 6th. Despite the setbacks, Leclerc ended the season 2nd in the Drivers' Championship with 3 wins and 11 podiums. That's the progress we need to see. With a car problem finally sorted, Ferrari could figure out how to make decisions like grown-ups without saying checking every time a driver asks something. Right? About time. The 2023 season began with high hopes for Ferrari to build on their 2022 success and more effective strategic calls. Psych! The SF23 still lacked the consistent race pace to challenge Red Bull, which had pulled ahead with a dominant car. Back to square one. Leclerc scored his first podium of the season in Azerbaijan. Qualifying was once again a strength, with Charles taking multiple pole positions, including at Baku and Spa. However, Ferrari's race pace often left him vulnerable, and he struggled to convert poles into victories. At the same time, his rivalry with Carlos Sainz continued. You already know, there is no way to stick to youngsters in 2 fast cars and not get a mess. At the Singapore Grand Prix, Leclerc was visibly frustrated after team orders favored Sainz in the final stint, a decision that cost Charles a potential podium finish. He finished 4th in Japan and executed a decent strategy, but was simply not fast enough to challenge for the podium, even though Ferrari had fastest pit stop in that race. Despite these issues, Leclerc remained focused and finished 5th in the Drivers' Championship, with 0 wins and 5 podiums. That's what happens when Red Bull dominates a season. The car wasn't there, Charles couldn't do anything with that, and Ferrari's strategy was still fully in place. It was time for some drastic changes if Ferrari wanted to stay competitive and not hurt their brand further. In 2024, under new team principal Frédéric Vasseur, the team focused on improving strategy execution and in-race adaptability. About time! Indeed, the SF24 proved to be a competitive car, especially on high downforce tracks. That meant it was time for Charles to show off, right? Leclerc's start of the season didn't go as planned, with a 4th place finish in the season opener in Bahrain. The Monaco Grand Prix will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most emotional moments in Charles Leclerc's career, as he finally broke the curse at his home race. At the start, he managed to grab the pole, which is key to winning in Monaco, even though the race had to restart because Perez decided to crash into the barriers on the opening laps. Leclerc secured his lead and no pit stops because of the crash. The rest of the race was quite uneventful, with Verstappen calling the race boring. My guy didn't like being stuck in 6th place, I guess. However, when Leclerc crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted. The race made him the first Monegasque driver to win the Monaco Grand Prix since Louis Charon in 1931. However, one of the key narratives of 2024 was Ferrari's strategy improvement. In the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, Ferrari cooked up an aggressive one-stop strategy to overtake McLaren, and it paid off. When Leclerc took the lead on lap 39, the Tifosi were so loud that the stands trembled. When Leclerc crossed the finish line, red smoke filled the air, red and yellow flags waved, and the track was flooded with Ferrari fans. It was an incredible sight. He just won 2 most important races for every Ferrari driver, Monza and Monaco, all in 1 year. By the end of the season, Charles had amassed 2 wins and 6 podiums, finishing 3rd in the Drivers' Championship, once again behind Verstappen. Statistically, Leclerc's performances over the past 3 seasons have not been among the best in the sport. With 7 wins, 22 podiums, and 18 pole positions since the start of 2022, his numbers are pretty average. While Leclerc has been competitive, Verstappen and Norris have significantly outperformed him in terms of wins and podiums. Yet, his career has been shaped by the limitations of the machinery and insane errors in execution. Ferrari appeared to be a team often on the verge of self-destruction, grappling with internal issues that undermined its potential. Have we seen the real Charles Leclerc just yet? I don't think so. We've seen the same kid from karting years, who's ready to grind as long as needed. But it's time for us to see Charles the champion, dominating races with insanely fast laps and fighting for the world title. For that, you need a car that can be on par with Red Bull. Hopefully, with Lewis Hamilton joining Ferrari, they can finally build one like that. But can't help but wonder, will Ferrari push for Hamilton or for Leclerc to be the leader of the team?